Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between! Welcome to the first ever Taylor's War Table, a series similar to what John's watch where I will be looking at new and upcoming games, creating a small review after playing them for a few hours. This will be a scripted series, unlike John's more free-flowing videos, because I do not have the ability to talk without a script when I'm on my own. So this is how it's going to have to go down. Now with that said, stand at attention, soldier, and listen up! Today at the War Table we'll be discussing the new 4-person survival shooter in the vein of Left 4 Dead, Back 4 Blood. More specifically, the beta you got access to by either pre-ordering the game or requesting access to it on their website. This is how John and I could play the game, as I signed up for the beta testing a while ago. So with this being a beta, it must be said that not all features are in there, it is not feature complete necessarily, and some things may change, though it's really unlikely. I'm only going to be discussing things that were in the beta, not what may be missing from it that will be in the full game. In as few words as possible, this is just Left 4 Dead, isn't it? Yes, the game at its core is just a prettier looking Left 4 Dead. It follows the same formula of start at a safe house and move to the next, rinse and repeat until you reach the end of the section, which will result in a horde and a daring escape. It has the feel of many Left 4 Dead games, which is often lost in translation with these types of games, because they end up focusing more on their gimmick and losing sight of the game at its core. There are a number of things which I really do like in the game, and a number of things which I don't like from about the 3 hours in one campaign playthrough that I've done. I will be looking at both the positives and negatives in turn so that it doesn't feel like two separate videos, and so I can paint a fuller picture. The first thing I want to discuss is something that I personally love. That's the shop in the game, which allows players to buy an assortment of guns, attachments, and other gear before leaving the safe house using the in-game currency. This shop really lets people play the way that they want to, with a few limitations. It only sells 2 weapons at a time, which doesn't always help you, but it lets you buy healing, explosive, and more utility items which can be used in the world. This means you can leave fully equipped and find a new/better weapon out in the world. It also allows you to buy potentially better attachments for your current weapons and make some guns more viable, giving you a better scope or sight. You can also buy team buffs and ammo in the shop, meaning you and your teammates can always carry more explosive and healing, and you don't have to fight for ammo types out in the world because you can always restock them at the safe house. It's a nice respite before the action kicks off and encourages a team to communicate about who should buy what so you can make use of all the utility items, including the toolkit. The downside of this is the money. The in-game currency that you can use in the shop is called copper. It is earned through completing challenges, finishing the level, and piles of it can be found throughout the world. The problem with copper is the same one Chris, John, and I ran into while playing Strange Brigade. Chris got sexually aggressive with it. And by that I mean you will often find yourselves fighting over who gets the copper as opposed to killing a special infected hunting you down. Personal greed can be a huge problem while playing with randos, but also with friends because everyone wants all the money to buy all the things, and this can create unneeded, unintentional conflict. It also means that if someone doesn't pay attention to the challenge presented at the beginning of the map, they can lose copper without realizing they're doing so. I'm looking at you about this one, John. I think this system could be fixed by either removing the copper from the map entirely, or meaning that if one person picks it up, it applies to the whole team and they can spend it individually. You may have to reduce the overall amount of copper on the map if they're able to collect it all and then spend it individually, but I think this would create a lot less conflict and help the team work more cohesively. The next thing I want to talk about is the weapons and their modifications or attachments, which I feel were a great addition to the game and remind me of the system in World War Z, whereas you leveled your weapon and got more attachments and became stronger as a result. These can include things such as scopes, sights, and lasers, barrel attachments like chokes, longer barrels, compensators, and silencers, magazines, often increasing the overall size and with some additional effects like faster reload or more damage. Lastly, you can equip stocks on all weapons, which increase your ADS, aim down sights time, and lets a player move faster while aiming. All of these attachments come in varying rarities that are similar to something you'd see in Apex Legends, where the higher tier rarities have a stronger effect, and mean you don't have to replace those mods with new ones. This for me is where these really fell off. The rarity system is one that I find doesn't always work in the game's favor, because it makes each attachment feel useless unless they're among the highest rarities, and even then they can become too much of a hot commodity. It also feels very arbitrary because oftentimes there is not a physical change in the weapon or add-on, just the stat changes. I understand that this is a problem with other games such as Apex, but in those games you're meant to fight against each other and other people, but here it really encourages discord between the team. The weapons run into a very similar issue to the mods and attachments, but let's focus on the positives first, the variety of weaponry you're able to wield in this game. Outside of the melee weapons and explosives that are available, the category of weapons includes sniper rifles, shotguns, submachine guns, assault rifles, light machine guns, and a variety of handguns. Like in Left 4 Dead, you're able to take a handgun or melee weapon and one of the other categories as your primary weapon. Each one of the categories has at least 4 weapons in it, which feels great, because each player can have a different gun in the same category and still feel like an individual. Each gun also comes with their own merits and drawbacks. The problem is, as John pointed out during our session together, which you will see in a later video, when someone gets a high rarity gun, they can be discouraged from grabbing a new gun, which may be more situationally appropriate. So, for instance, they may have a really high tier sniper rifle, but then they're entering a building where a submachine gun might be better use. This is also the problem with mods, as they stay with the gun that you originally put them on unless swapped out with new ones. So you can find new guns with mods on them, but if you don't, you might be encouraged to stay with a sniper in close quarters, as I mentioned earlier. So the mods effectively compound the issue that you may have with the guns. One small side note that I found is the guns don't have a lot of punch in their sound when you're firing them outside of the handguns. I really feel like the weapons could have been designed better, audibly speaking, to really have a nice impact and make you feel like you're holding a high caliber rifle. Now, the big draw and gimmick of this game versus other Left 4 Dead style games is the perk card system, which provides the player with a series of passives and can provide changes to the mission itself. These cards can include things such as more stamina, health, and ammo, whereas on the enemy or more situational side, it can offer additional rewards for things such as not scaring the birds and creating a horde, having every survivor make it at the end, or carries a series of blood samples to the end of the mission similar to a Noam Chomsky. These cards can also include things like stronger hordes, more special infected, and other varieties to really change up the situation itself. These cards are all sorted into different decks that the player creates for different situations, meaning you can run something like a support deck or a more offensive deck depending on who you're playing with. Now, the deck does have to be selected at the beginning of the run, so you need to really know what your teammates are going with. When you start a campaign run, you're given the scenario card for the mission, and then you select from 5 cards in your deck. You will carry this buff with you for the rest of the run. This happens between each mission, and some cards can provide benefit for the whole team, so it's important to work together and coordinate your cards for the role that each person is filling. This also means that each time you start a new mission, you get an additional buff, which will either apply to just you or your team as a whole, so you really want to figure out what cards you want in your deck so you can make sure they appear. These cards are the big draw because they're the live service portion of the game and the way that it tries to get you to come back. Doing campaign runs, and I'm sure the versus matches, will provide you with the overarching currency known as supplies, which you'll pour into supply lines to purchase new cards that you will put into circulation in your decks. I think that these cards could make the game very difficult and be a lot of fun, but it's the live service problem of the modern time, which only entices microtransactions that firmly put these in the negative category if that does come to be upon full release. There are not microtransactions in the game as of right now, but I do believe they will find themselves in the game sooner or later, and traditional progression becomes even harder when you want to play solo and not pay any money for more cards. I know a lot of people love to play these types of games with their friends, making a full squad of 4, or even taking in 3 with one bot. This is the major problem right now, is the AI for both the cleaners and the zombies is kind of garbage. I personally like to play a lot of games solo, even if they're intended to be played with other people, so this one's more of an understandable shortcoming. The bots seem to always want to stick with the player even when there's objectives at multiple locations, which means I need to run to both consecutively with them following me. The upside is that you're able to collect all the copper from the map, but it really doesn't matter because you're the only one buying anything, so you don't have to coordinate with anyone or really do much. They also fail to combat the effects of special infected. For example, when I was stuck in the webbing, all you need to do is melee the webs to eliminate them, and the AI surrounded me but did nothing, and then we all died. The same is true for the enemy AI when playing solo. They will focus primarily on the player, and this also creates the problem when the friendly bot doesn't know how to combat the special infected, because it just creates needless suffering. Speaking of the special infected, they suffer from one of the most prominent issues of older games, surprisingly enough, especially games like Dead Space, which is effectively shoot the glowy bits. Obviously, this means that the enemies will hide their glowing bits, which makes them harder to shoot, and can be much more annoying at times, or they're too exposed and you can snipe them from a mile away. It feels like a bit of an outdated design for the boss monster, especially for the boss monsters known as the Ogre. I think this game could be really great and really be the Left 4 Dead of 2021 with prettier graphics, awesome guns, and modifications. They do need to work on some of the animations for the enemies, and the effects, especially on explosions, need a lot of work. But I think the core is there. There's just too much bloat in some areas, especially around the copper and the cards, if they become microtransaction heavy slogs. All in all, I did enjoy the time that I had with the game. I've only again played about 3 hours, so I've only done one run, because there's not that much in there, but it's a beta, so we'll see what happens upon full release. And keep in mind, you guys can play the beta too, because it goes live on August 12th for everyone. The game will be released in full and at full price in late October, so we'll just have to see what happens with that. That will be all for this, the first ever war table. Leave your thoughts down below, and I expect you soldiers to fall in line for the next debriefing. Dismissed.